And once again, a very big welcome to all of our attendees this morning. We want to say thank you to the members of IOPSA as well as those who joined from outside of IOPSA. We do know that we have other members joining us from FEM as well as private persons joining us for the Toolbox Talk. And we just want to say how grateful we are that you've taken this time out to hear these Toolbox Talks. So to start off with, the tips to continually prevent COVID-19, we do know this. We obviously want to ensure that good hygiene practices are part of our daily lives. Now, moving on to the PRIME course, we did mention this last week. PRIME, which is the Plumbing Risk and Incident Management Education course, is starting on the 1st of March 2022. If you haven't registered as yet, there is a bit of a registration process because of the value that you will be receiving. But we do ask that each and every one of you join this course. It will assist you over the next year. You can do it a lot sooner, but we suggest taking the time out to really study hard and get through this entire course. It is going to be a credit-bearing course, so you will be getting CPD points either from PRB, or if you are a SIOSH member in the health and safety community, you are also able to do this. So regardless of what type of health and safety system you run for your company, why not take a look at the PRIME course and see if we cannot assist you a little bit more. The value of the course is 15,000 Rand, and it is free to all paid up members of IOPSA. So if you have a health and safety committee, perhaps a health and safety manager or officer at your offices, maybe get them to go on this course, even if it's things that they already know. It would be a good refresher. None of us would ever want to say that we don't need any reminders. Even myself, I constantly go on courses in order to keep my health and safety knowledge up to date. And at the same time, we don't know everything, so we can always learn. That being said, we also want to learn from you, our members. If there's anything that you've experienced over the past few months or years that you could assist us with, please let us know. We could always pass this information on to our other members, giving them a successful occupational health and safety management system, or even if it's something that you've experienced in the plumbing industry and you would just like to share it with us. So let's get straight into the Toolbox Talk this morning. Our safety thought for this week is start safe, work safe, finish safe. So we know these many safety slogans, starting safe, but we want to continue that whole process. We want to start safely in the morning with this Toolbox Talk, but then throughout the rest of the day and throughout the rest of the week, we want to work in a safe manner and then finish the week off safe as well. And one of the things you as plumbers are going to be doing and using a lot during this week are hand and power tools. Now, let us take a look at what this means. Obviously, any tools that we are going to be using, whether it's just basic hand tools for plumbing, or perhaps you're going to be using drills, grinders, things like that to be able to cut into the walls. Perhaps you're using a little rock breaker to be able to cut out some concrete and then drilling or grinding out in order to put some pipe work in. All of this will require you to use tools. Now, you have to appoint an inspector for any tools, and this is in accordance with Section 8 of the Occupational Health and Safety Act. But if you are in the construction industry, then you will then have a construction appointment. So there are two different types of appointments, and this is why we are encouraging you to go on that PRIME course. You see, we will then explain why the need for two different appointments. Why do we need an OHS Act Section 8 appointment for one and a construction regulation appointment for the other? Then you do a risk assessment. Now, Section 8.2.d of the Occupational Health and Safety Act states that all employers are responsible to ensure that their work is performed without risk to employees as well as to others who might be affected by their work. And this comes down to a good hazard identification and risk assessment. A risk assessment really is the most fundamental part of risk management, because you have to identify what the hazard is first and then assess the risk to see whether it is low, medium, and high, and then implement certain control measures based on a hierarchy of controls. Now, again, all of this type of information is going to be set out in a proper manual, a proper system for you, and it's going to be taken through about 7 days worth of information, implemented into a course, an introduction to H.I.R.A, how H.I.R.A actually works, and then how to actually complete a continuous-based risk assessment. This is all part of the PRIME course that you will be receiving, and you will then know exactly how to perform a risk assessment. Now, if you do have somebody doing the risk assessment for you. And that's fine. There's no problem with having an external company. Many of you are using ourselves here at OHSS to do your risk assessments, but we always encourage you to please read through it. Go through this information with your employees. You see, many employees who are listening in to these Toolbox Talks know what a risk assessment is, but do you know what is inside that risk assessment and how it affects you working your day-to-day routines? See, if the risk assessment states that you are working at heights and one of the risks is dropping of tools, we might only look at falling from heights. So ourselves, yes, it is a higher priority. We do not want people to fall, much less do we want people to fall and not have fall protection. But at the same time, we might lose sight of the smaller risks, things like having our tools in our hand and then these dropping from a scaffold or a ladder. This could maybe cause damage to the tool or the property that is below us, but oftentimes we have other plumbers in the vicinity, maybe our colleagues that are working with us, bringing us tools, bringing us equipment, and there's a possibility that we could drop it on them. That is also putting a life at risk. And so we need to know the risks associated with the task that we're performing, especially with the use of hand tools and power tools, and how it might affect us, how it might affect the working environment around us, and how it might even affect those who might be in the vicinity where we are working. And then this goes without saying, we need to inspect our tools before starting work. Now, yes, we do understand there are specific types of registers and checklists that need to be completed on a daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, 6-monthly, and annual basis. All of these registers and checklists are kept in your safety file or your safety management system, and we basically tick them off and ensure that all our tools are in good working condition. So why do we keep saying that you need to inspect tools before starting work? Well, as we mentioned, with the use of tools as well as the use of fall protection equipment, because anything can happen within that month of using that tool, we just want you to do a visual inspection on that hand tool or that power tool. So yes, the register is there to tell you what type of tools you're going to be using for that task. Then you have a checklist to tell you what you need to inspect on the actual equipment, the actual tool or power tool that you are going to be using. But we also want you to do a visual inspection. So we are talking to the operators here. Perhaps you have somebody already appointed as a hand tool inspector, and their responsibility is to check all tools once a month. Now, this could be somebody in your stores. This could be somebody in the company that collects all the tools at the end of the week or the end of the month and inspects them. Construction regulation says all hand tools can be checked every month. Some construction companies say we need you to inspect it every week. And then when it comes to power tools, the requirement is daily, but again, it depends on your risk assessment, as we spoke about last week, because some higher risk hand tools or power tools will require daily checklists, an actual physical checklist. Others will require weekly or monthly checklists, depending on the type of work you're doing. Again, it doesn't really matter how you structure your management system around checking your tools. I'm speaking to the operator, the person who's physically going to be using that tool. So not the hand tool inspector or power tool inspector, you, the user, the one picking up that hammer, the one using that drill or operating that grinder. Visually inspect it before you start working. Take a few minutes and just check whether it is safe to use. The reason for that is human tendency, we might miss something. Perhaps you're tired, perhaps it's end of the month, perhaps you need to get home very quickly and we don't check the tool as well as we should have. Well, the hand tool inspector or power tool inspector might not be operating that tool tomorrow. You are. And so don't put your life in somebody else's hands by saying, if they checked it, it should be fine. Check it yourself. If there's a problem, take it through to your supervisor or manager, explain what the situation is, and get a new tool, get something that is safe to use. Now, another thing with tools, hand tools and power tools is know-how. We need to be trained in the use of tools. Now, as a plumber, you go through your entire learnership program, and as you learn to become a plumber, you learn to use tools. But now, tools are constantly changing because the types of equipment that we are using also change. And so when manufacturers bring out new types of methodologies to implement certain plumbing or certain equipment within plumbing, they might introduce a different type of tool. And we know that they are always willing to come out to site and teach you how to use this tool. And that's great. We really appreciate that from the manufacturers or our suppliers. But remember, ask them for a manual. If they don't have a manual, tell them to write one up. Get them to give you something substantial so that you can implement this into your own training management program within your own company. Yes, you might get trained outside of the company by a specialist, somebody who's designed that tool. But then for continual improvement, what about in 3 months to 6 months' time? Yes, you're using that tool often, you know how to use it, but don't forget that we use it the way we want to use it, and we might start taking shortcuts, and that becomes the behavior that we are used to. Then we train someone else, and we train them on those same shortcuts. Eventually, it's like broken telephone. We then have got somebody years down the line that is not using that tool correctly. So stick to what is written, stick to the safety aspects of it, and don't forget to have your appointment, do your risk assessment, inspect it before you use it, and know how to use that tool. That is really the motto and goal behind starting safe, working safe, and then finishing safely. So as we mentioned, the appointed person, a manager must appoint a hand tool inspector. This manager, we are talking about somebody from the Occupational Health and Safety Act. We are not speaking specifically about construction regulation. That is a different regulation and different type of appointment. Although you might have the same duties and responsibilities, remember, it is a legal appointment. And so depending on the scope of work in which your area is, you need to have a correct appointment for that specific scope. Here in the Occupational Health and Safety Act, Section 8, generally an 8.2e person is a manager or a supervisor that has been put in charge of just operational works. And then you have an 8.2i. An 8.2i person is someone who is more technically minded, somebody who's actually got physical and educational background training on the physical equipment and tools you are using. And that is more a technical person. And so you might have an office manager, somebody who can assist you on the administrative side. And then you'll have an A2I person who is more an operational manager on the technical side. And so both of these appointments will appoint a hand tool supervisor depending on what scope of work you're working in. Once again, so an office manager might be able to appoint a store person as a hand tool inspector, but then we are looking at the technical manager, somebody who is operational outside on site, who will then appoint a site specific hand tool inspector, perhaps for one of the tasks or projects that you are working on. Now, all hand tool inspectors, and we'll include power tool inspectors, although we will get to power tools now, must inspect hand tools every single time that your checklist tells you to do it. So it's either daily, weekly, or monthly. And this depends, again, on how your management system structure is designed, as well as the risk assessment that goes along with it. Now, you need to have a correct record of this. And the reason for that is should something go wrong, we want to go back to these registers and checklists and see if there was something wrong that could have been prevented. Was it overlooked? And was it put in the hands of somebody who perhaps didn't know how to use it, wasn't trained correctly in the use of that tool, or perhaps they just used a tool that was not safe? So really, we are not saying that the hand tool inspector is the last line of defense. You as the operator, the employee using that tool, you should be the last line of defense. But you are not going to complete any documentation, obviously. We are looking at the hand tool inspector to do that. And so as a hand tool inspector, if you are appointed in this position, please make sure that all of your hand tools are properly inspected. They are safe, clean, and then also stored in the correct manner so that they are not damaged before we even use them. Then a register should be kept on hand of all the tools that are your responsibility. Now, we think about it, hammers and chisels, these don't come with serial numbers. And so maybe a good idea for you as a company to invest in some sort of methodology of identifying your tools. And because you've got so many of them, perhaps it's a toolbox that is going to be numbered, and all the tools that plumbing team users are only in that toolbox. And so that's how you would identify them. But should something go wrong, we encourage you to make sure that you check every single tool. If it doesn't have a serial number, sometimes it can be overlooked. And there are easy ways to number your tools. Now, if any deviation occurs, the hand tool must be removed from use, and we cannot stress this enough. So please, employees, if you are on site and you're using a tool that's been issued to you safely, and then it gets damaged on site, don't continue to use it until you can get back to stores and then replace it. You see, because in that time frame, first of all, you might say to yourself, well, it's already damaged. I'm not going to damage it more by using it. Well, that's not the point. You see, you might seriously injure yourself or others, or perhaps even damage the type of plumbing equipment that you are installing. And then you might have a client that is really upset with you for doing an improper installation purely because you used a tool that was damaged. So what do we want to do? We want to stick with a H.I.R.A program. We need to eliminate any possibility for things going wrong. And if we cannot eliminate it, we want to then try and isolate or substitute it with something that is a lot safer to do. So all H.I.R.A programs should help us to implement a form of protection for our employees that is giving them information on what their scope of work is, what are the risks, what are the dangers, and then ensure that they are working in accordance with what the regulations state for those hand tools. So if it's just basic hand tools, they just need to be made aware. What are the dangers of using these hand tools? Perhaps just the danger of the tool itself, the danger of the use of the tool, and then the danger of the application of that tool to your scope of work. It will also assist you then and understand or help you understand then how to develop a safe working procedure. Now, this is different from a risk assessment. It is also different from a method statement. Again, in Prime, the course that we've offered to you, we are going to explain what each of these are with examples. It will explain to you then the difference between a safe working procedure as well as a method statement and how to use that hand tool correctly. Now, what's brilliant about these types of documents, a risk assessment, a method statement, a safe working procedure, even a safe operating procedure, all of these can be used in our training and development of our employees, from new employees to ones who have been there for many years. And just a special note to those of you who have been in plumbing for many, many, many years. You've realized that you've only gotten to this point by learning and continuing to learn throughout the years on how to do plumbing even better. And you've gotten to the point of becoming perhaps master plumbers or masters in your area of plumbing because of the learning process that you went through. Let us pass this knowledge and information on to our younger plumbers, to our newly beginning plumbers. See, we can assist them to know and understand how tools work, not only how they work, but also the safety aspects and the dangers of those. You then protecting them. This is a form of C.R.A. or continuous risk assessment. Continuous risk assessment is exactly in the name. It's continuous. We are always looking at what our risk is and how we can prevent these risks from affecting the livelihood, the health and safety of our employees. So these come in different forms. Oftentimes you'll get to a site and you are required to fill in a DSTI, or you are required to fill in a JHA. All of these are different types of risk assessments or risk analysis documents in order for the employer of the client of the company to ensure that you as a contractor have taken special precautions for the scope and task that you're performing, including the equipment and tools that you are using. So yes, you'll have a baseline risk assessment, an issue-based risk assessment for that site, but then they will give you a daily safe task instruction or a job hazard analysis for you to really identify for that specific scope what is going to be dangerous for your employees. Now, condition of hand tools, we cannot stress this enough. It needs to be kept in a good, safe, and clean condition. Now, after using your tools, do you clean them and put them back in the correct place. Oftentimes we get to a plumbing site and tools are strewn all over the place. And when we mention this, they say, well, when we finish the job, we will put it all back. But there is nothing more frustrating than while you are working, while you are performing the job, that you need to look for tools. So you've used it and now it's gone. And we know many have made funny jokes about this, that you put it down in one place and it almost disappears instantly and then you cannot find it. Well, the jokes are based on real life experiences. People have used the tool, thought they put it down somewhere, and then it just disappeared. And we've opened walls, we've opened cavities, and hey, here's a pair of plumbing pliers that are inside the cavity, or here's a hammer in the ceiling left over because it wasn't put in the right place after use, not after the project. So again, I'm speaking to you, the employees using those tools, not your supervisor, your manager, you, the actual employee using that tool. Don't just put it down. Make sure it's in the right place so that you can easily find it the next time you need to use it. So I'm not saying that you've put it down for 5 minutes while you're busy tying something or soldering something. We understand that all goes according to your work. But if you're not going to use that tool for the next few minutes, put it back in the right place and then get it when you need it again. So all special tools obviously need to be kept in good condition. Trolleys, wheelbarrows, or any type of equipment that you're going to be using with wheels, your welders, your compressors, these must also be kept in good condition and easily maneuverable. No handmade tools are allowed unless they are specially designed and they come with an actual guarantee. So the company who's designing or manufacturing these tools will be a company that is in accordance with the SAN standard. Any guards or handles that are fitted must obviously also be checked all the time. And if you have a chisel, please remember you also need to have a guard on that handle for the chisel because we do not want you hurting your hands while using it. So most tools come with some sort of safety feature that is easily overcome. You see, it's very easy for us not to use that safety feature. And all too often, it's that safety feature that could have protected us from small, maybe insignificant risks or injuries and accidents that might have occurred. But let us prevent the small things. There's nothing wrong with preventing a cut, a bruise, or a punctured finger because there was just some sort of safety feature we could have used, but we preferred not to. When we store our tools, specifically looking at our knives, the sharp blades, we want to ensure that all our tools are stored in a toolbox. Again, they need to be clean, neat, orderly, and in a way that they cannot cause damage, not chucked into the back of the bucky and then taken out when we get to the next site. Remember, we also want to stress this, that the tools are an extension of you as an individual, not as a company, the person using the tool, the individual plumber. The way you look after your tools says a lot about how people will view you as looking after yourself, because the tools are the very things you need in order to complete the task you are performing. Now, as we mentioned last week with electricity, it is a danger, and there are the same dangers when working with power tools. So aside from hand tools, power tools also have a lot of dangers. And the most common of this is electrical injuries, when the electrical current is flowing between your hand and feet. And remember, it only takes 1% of a 100-watt light bulb power to be able to hold you onto that electricity, and 10% of that power will then kill you. Now, this happens when a person touches an energized line or cable, perhaps if it is not correctly isolated, or maybe even the cable is damaged. And then what happens is this electrical energy is looking for the shortest path to the ground. And so it passes through the body, and oftentimes it goes through your heart and your lungs, and these are damaged by electrical energy. It could take time, it could be even instant, where a person dies because of electrical tools. So why do incidents and accidents like this happen all the time? Well, it is incorrect or damaged wiring. Again, I'm speaking to you as the operator of these tools. Lack of inspections, not just the checklist for your stores or the person who has been appointed, but you as the operator. Don't put your life in the hands of the person inspecting that tool. Do a visual inspection yourself. Make sure that the tool you're using is safe to use. Poor maintenance. Supervisors, managers, employers, now we speak to you. If an employee brings you a tool that is damaged, do not tell them to continue using it just to finish the project. That is an unsafe way of working. Poor maintenance will lead to incidents and accidents that could have been prevented, and you can be held liable for these. So employers, you are responsible to maintain it, but employees, you are responsible to keep them in a maintainable condition. So don't throw your tools down or misuse them just because your employer has to buy new tools. We also want to ensure that you work together with your employer. Then do not rush the job. Rushing a job will mean that you use that tool incorrectly, perhaps even damaging it. Now, we see this often at sites, the overloading of sockets on site because the site is not live yet. There's pretty much only 1 or 2 power points for the entire site. And so everybody's rushing to try and get their electricity fixed for the day in order to complete their project. And all of us fight with a principal contractor because they are supposed to give us the electricity in order to do our job. We understand that. We sympathize with you as plumbing contractors on site. We know it's an issue, but please don't put too many tools in. Don't use incorrect wiring, and poor preparation, not knowing when to do the project or how to do the project, often comes down to overloading of sockets purely because we were just poorly planned or poorly prepared. So power tools, again, if you are working in the construction regulations, you are going to have a construction regulation 24.E inspection appointment. Or if you are just outside of construction, we will then fall under the electrical machinery regulation, section 9. Again, this will come with a H.I.R.A, a risk assessment, inspection, use, storage of power tools. Again, speaking to you who are going to use these tools, what are you checking? Inspect them before you start using them. So what type of checks should you be looking for? Well, are the cables in good condition? Are they free from joints? Is the cables properly secured? Are the switches in good condition? Casings free of obvious damage? You will notice that everything you are visually checking for are the same things that should be on the checklist for your hand tool and power tool inspector. So yes, they are going to formally put that into a document and inspect it and keep that for records. But you as an operator can visually check for all of these items. Now you might think, well, it makes it easier for me to have a list. Well, then get a list. Get something printed out for you to visually go through a step-by-step checklist of what you should be looking for. You might not need to complete it. So just have one, have it laminated, keep it in your toolbox, and make sure that you go through that list before you start using that tool. It might be a good idea for you to be able to make this up for all of your toolboxes, just as a continual risk assessment program. Remember, the most important tools that we have are our hands, our brains, our eyes, our ears, all of these things that we use to complete our job physically. So yes, when we damage a power tool or a hand tool, it's never good, but they can be replaced. There are certain other types of tools that do not come with spare parts. And these often come from the misuse of those very tools that we are failing to inspect and maintain. So thank you very much for joining our Toolbox Talk this morning. We hope you gleaned some good information from hand tools and power tools, what to do, what not to do. We look forward to seeing you next week, Tuesday, for our final Toolbox Talk for February, that is housekeeping.